Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will tell you about a homeowners association that wants to organize a meeting on my land. I woke up at 4:35 a.m. to the kind of pounding that makes your spine think a bear learned how to knock. The cabin walls carry every vibration like a guitar body, so the door sounded 3 feet tall and offended. My dog, Patch, a mutt who looks like a tuxedo spilled on a fox, was already at the window, head cocked, ears forward, not barking yet, which told me this wasn't a friend. I checked the camera feed on the tablet I keep by the bed and saw headlights stacked like a stadium. A charter bus idled on the switchback below my gate. Red taillights glowed on a caravan of SUVs. The intercom on the gate crackled like it wanted coffee. A woman's voice came through brisk and sure, the tone people use when they think the universe is a call center. "We're here for our reservation. We need your gate keys." I swallowed the taste of sleep and pinched my nose. "Reservation to my house?" "Your mountain cabin," she said, as if I had dared to forget what my own driveway led to. 70 guests. The association booked it for our annual retreat. You were informed. Hand over the keys at the gate." I watched the bus driver rub his eyes with the heels of his hands. A damp fog had crept up the ravine while I slept, flattering the headlights into halos. The gate, a steel tube contraption I'd installed after break-ins in the area last fall, sat black and stubborn across the road. There were reflective no trespassing signs on either side, the kind that stay loud even when you squint. On my screen, a man in a blazer and hiking boots stepped into the lens and tried a smile. He had that practiced neighborhood leader look, the kind of face that lives next to a logo. "Good morning," he boomed at my camera. "We don't want trouble. The association reserved your venue." "Colt?" I said into the intercom. "Is that you?" "That's correct," he said, a bit surprised. "This is Colt. I don't think we've met, but we handle community events up here." "And you are?" "The guy who owns the cabin behind that gate," I said, and then, "You don't have a reservation," the woman cut in. "We have a confirmation. We have vendors scheduled. We've paid for a private sunrise breakfast and a guided hike. The bus is full. It's 4:35 a.m. We need access now." Patch sneezed. I slipped on a hoodie and joggers and tucked my phone into my pocket. I know this will sound dramatic, but I had rehearsed this moment in my head for 3 weeks. I didn't think the bus would be real, but I knew the tone would be. The moment they said we were informed, I knew they were going to try to turn their paperwork into my emergency. Here's the thing. By daylight, the road that leads to my gate looks like part of the same mountain development where everyone's driveways branch off like capillaries. The road my gate blocks is not part of the development. It's a private easement that peels away from the shared road and snakes up into my acreage, which used to be my uncle's hunting parcel before he left it to me. He had split the deed from the development long before any homeowners association existed. They govern the lots on their plat. They do not govern me. I grabbed the key bundle I'd set aside for exactly this nonsense. It was on a blaze orange paracord lanyard, and half the keys were blanks, the kind you can buy in a 5-pack and polish with your thumb. They were decoys. The only real key was to my shop's side door, and that one I'd ground down so it wouldn't open anything. Dangling from the ring was a laminated card printed with the text of our state's criminal trespass statute, one side in plain language, the other with citations. I stepped onto the porch and breathed steam. The sky was smeared with that pre-dawn gray that makes every tree look like it's thinking about something. The intercom crackled again. "Hello, we're losing time." "I'm coming," I said, "but I'm not unlocking anything." "Excuse me? You're going to want to hear this from a human voice," I said. "Stay put." I took the footpath that skirts my workshop and curves down to the overlook. From there you can see the gate half a switchback below. The bus idled in a stationary grumble. A few people had stepped out to stretch and were hugging themselves against the cold. They were dressed like a catalog for outdoorsy office people. Puffy vests over team-branded quarter zips. Sneakers that have a lot of opinions about incline. The man in the blazer, Colt, stood near the gate with a woman in a fleece jacket holding a thick clipboard, and a third man I recognized as the maintenance guy, a night owl sort of fellow named Bram, who could fix anything and usually had an apple in his pocket. Later I would learn the woman was Tessa, who called herself an event coordinator, which turned out to mean person who believes the world owes her a venue. I shouted from the overlook, "Good morning!" Heads turned. I waved the lanyard. "You wanted to talk to the owner?" Colt smiled big. "Excellent. We're on a tight schedule. Let's get those keys." I descended the path until I reached the sharp cut where the land falls to the road. The distance between us was about 30 vertical feet, wrapped by the switchback, but I might as well have been across a table. You told my camera you have a reservation, I called. Who did you book with? With the association, Tessa yelled back. We have a group license that covers community spaces. This is private property, I said and tapped my chest. A private residence. It isn't a community space. There's no license. There's me. She held up the clipboard like a shield. We have a signed agreement. Who signed it? She peered down as if the page had misbehaved. A.J. Hart. That's the name on the county map for the parcel. My name is Jonah, I said. That part is right, but I didn't sign your form. Colt's smile relocated itself into something more managerial. Look, he said, we're not trying to pick a fight. We've used the bluff above your property for years. The association pays for maintenance on the shared road, which includes the spur past your turnoff. No, it doesn't, I said. Check the plat lines. You cover up to that bend where the old stone marker is. After that, you enter my easement. You don't maintain it. I do, and the bluff is inside my fence. I put that fence up because people were turning the ledge into a glass bottle museum. We sent notice, Tessa said. She had a trademark way of saying sentences like she was fast-forwarding through the parts of life that bored her. Multiple emails and a certified letter. If you had an issue, you needed to object within 10 days. We reserved this first. I held up my phone. Tessa, 2 weeks ago you emailed me a one-page event use agreement with a blank where the signature goes. I replied and said, no, this is my home, not a rentable pavilion. Then Bram here came by at dusk with a clipboard and tried to sell me on it in person. I told him no. Bram, you remember that? Bram looked at his boots. Yeah, you said it wasn't happening. Then last Tuesday, I went on, I received an email timestamped 1:13 a.m. that said thanks for returning the signed copy, with a PDF attached. And that PDF had my name typed on a signature line with a slapdash scrawl above it that looks like someone tried to perfume a forgery by drawing a sneeze. I replied and said, not my signature. Cancel your bus. No one responded. Colt's jaw shifted in the fog. He nodded at Tessa. She adjusted the clipboard like altitude was the problem. Our legal committee checked, she said. You are within the boundaries of the association when you pass the mailbox cluster. My uncle separated this parcel before there was an association, I said. It's its own plat. I'm not a member. Your CC and ours can be used to kindle a campfire on a rainy day, if I'm feeling generous. We have 70 people on that bus, she said calmly. There are breakfast boxes scheduled for drop-off in 15 minutes. We have a speaker arriving at the overlook. We have vendors we paid. This was properly reserved. If you don't provide access, the association will impose fines and seek reimbursement. There it was. That word you learn to recognize if you live near an HOA long enough. Reimbursement. The shape their requests take when they want what you have. I slid the lanyard farther through my fingers until the laminated card swung. Tessa, I said, do you see this sign to your right, the big one? She glanced. Yes. It says private road, no trespassing without owner's permission. It cites the statute. It references the penalty. It's posted at the threshold of the easement. It has been there since February. I replaced it with a brighter one last week. The gate is locked. That gate has a tiny hole in the post where a camera watches everything. I can send a link to the live footage if you'd like a souvenir for your legal committee. Jonah, Colt began, hands spread. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable, I said. I'm not calling the sheriff yet. A ripple went through the group by the bus. The maintenance guy shifted his apple from one pocket to the other. The bus driver took a long drink from a paper cup and then put both hands on the wheel like the wheel had promised him something. Okay, Colt said, exhaling. Tell me what would satisfy you. You cancel your event, apologize to the people on that bus, turn them around and send them somewhere that actually exists on your event calendar and doesn't start with Jonah's porch. You send an email to your membership saying your legal committee made a bad call and you will audit every contract you think you have with J. Hart on it. You return any vendor deposits you placed based on the idea that my front yard is community recreation space. You refund whatever dues you frivolously spent organizing this, and you explain to whomever you need to explain it to. Then, I said, you leave me alone. That's ridiculous, Tessa said, but there was a tremble threaded through the word like a secret. Reasonable, I said, and pointed to the laminated card. While this is still a request, she set her jaw. Keys. I looked down at the lanyard. The decoy blanks winked in the bus lights. I sighed. Fine, I said, because sometimes the better strategy is the one they think they engineered. Here you go. I took the steep steps down to the turn between the two stretches of road. My boots skidded a little on the wet pine needles. When I reached the gate, I did not unlock it. I looped the lanyard through the mesh of the front access panel, which is a little steel box that houses the padlock. I clicked the carabiner on the end. The keys dangled like a bad promise. I straightened up and met Colt's eyes. "You now have keys," I said. "And that laminated card? Read both sides. Consider it a bonus." "It's not unlocking," Tessa snapped, fitting one of the blanks into the padlock and twisting pointlessly. I pointed to the red strobe mounted on the post. "See the light? It means the gate is in security mode. That kicks in when the motion sensor flips between midnight and 5 a.m., which means that even if you had the correct key, which you don't, it would trip the relay and lock it again. If you try to cut the chain or climb the gate, you'll trigger the siren and the camera recording will auto-send to a folder my friend the attorney can access from his breakfast table. Also, the sheriff." "Attorney?" Bram said, looking up. "I consulted someone when a forged agreement bearing my name was emailed at 1:13 a.m., I said. "Wild, right?" Colt's confidence faltered like a propane flame in a gust. It puffed and came back smaller. "We can solve this," he said. "We've dealt with difficult owners before." "I'm not difficult," I said evenly. "I'm awake." A woman stepped off the bus wearing a blanket as a shawl and asked, "Are we watching the sunrise here or not?" Her voice was weary in a way that suggested she had argued with a spouse about whether this trip would be relaxing. "No, ma'am," I called, and then softer to the group in general. "I'm sorry you all were told this was a destination. This road is not part of their jurisdiction. You deserve better planning." Colt gave me a glare polished enough to eat with. "You're interfering with a lawful event. You're trespassing," I said. "You haven't stepped beyond the sign yet, which is probably the wisest thing you've done all morning. And you're blocking access to my neighbors who might need this road to visit family or call an ambulance. So before this turns into a full Saturday, you can go." "There will be fines," Tessa said, and I could hear her gripping the sentence like a railing. "You agreed to the association's architectural and recreational guidelines when you used the shared road." "I agreed to drive like a grown-up and not knock over the mailboxes," I said. "That's the extent of our relationship." She tried another blank in the padlock and turned it until the metal complained. "This is interference," she repeated. "We have a confirmation." "And I have state law," I said, tapping the laminated card with my finger. "Interfering with that would be unwise." Something in my tone must have broadcast that I was done being nice, because Colt raised a placating hand. "Let's step back," he told Tessa. He turned to me and in a quieter voice said, "If we reschedule within the next week, could we use the overlook with a smaller group, no bus, maybe 20 people? We'll get a permit." "You can't get a permit to use my land," I said. "You can ask me. And right now the answer is no, because you just brought a charter bus here at 4:35 a.m. based on a forged contract and threatened me with fines. Try a grassy patch you actually own." A gust of wind stirred the pines. The fog thinned and showed the bruised outline of the horizon, a sliver of light like a secret slipping out. In another life, I might have shared this moment with strangers. In this one, the plastic smile of Colt and the sharp edges of Tessa's insistence made the air feel tight. "Bram," Colt said, "call the tow to move the gate if we have to." Bram cleared his throat. "We can't tow a gate, Colt." "You know what I mean," Colt snapped. "We have bolt cutters at the shop." "Try cutting my chain," I said. "See what the siren does. See what the sheriff says when he arrives to a recorded active destruction of property at a posted private road." "You said you weren't calling the sheriff," Tessa said. "I said yet," I replied and tapped the screen on my phone with my thumb. The emergency shortcut I had pre-programmed flashed blue. I give people the courtesy of deciding whether they'd like to back away from a bad idea before I press the button that makes everyone else's breakfast part of our morning. The bus driver leaned out his window. "Ma'am," he said to Tessa, "we can take a scenic loop down to the valley and catch the sunrise from the public overlook by the dam. It'll be tight on timing, but we can do it." "That overlook's reserved too," she said stubbornly. Then, seeing Colt's look, she added, "I'll make a call." "Make two," I said. "One to whoever typed my name on your form and one to your insurance." "Insurance?" Colt said. "Carrying 70 people up a mountain road to a property you don't control is a liability buffet," I said. "Your risk manager is going to ask some pointed questions about who told the bus company this was okay." "Jonah," Colt said, but I was done with the intercom voice and the half-polite theater. I stepped to the gate, looked him in the eye, and pointed at the laminated card again. "You have 10 minutes to decide whether you want to turn around politely or test the siren," I said. "In 9 minutes, I'm calling the sheriff either way to report the crowd of vehicles blocking a private easement. If you leave in 8, I will email the attorney who is awake right now with a note that I consider this resolved with a stern warning. If you stay for the 10th minute, we do this the way the law does it, with reports and oath statements and a lot of paperwork that follows you around. There is a quality to silence when people realize the person they assumed was a doormat is actually reading the book entitled How to Say No and Mean It. It's a silence with corners, so you can set things on it. The mountain held that silence while the sky began to separate into layers. The bus driver checked his watch. A couple attendees on the shoulder hopped from foot to foot, not because of the cold, but because awkwardness makes you look for some part of your body to displace. Tessa dialed with tight, stabbing fingers. Colt looked at the padlock like it had insulted him personally. Bram took out his apple, then thought better of it, and put it away. I let the seconds rope together into a minute. We were told, a woman in line at the bus door said to no one in particular, that this was all worked out. I'm sure you were, I said, as gently as I could manage. But they were told no. Twice. A man in a camo cap near the back piped up, "Isn't this federal land up here?" "Nope," I said. "You're thinking of another place you saw on a postcard." "I have the email," Tessa snapped suddenly, covering the phone. "From J. Hart that says happy to host this year." "Show me the email header," I said. "What?" "The header," I repeated. "The part with the routing information, the reply to address, the thing your legal committee should have looked at." "We're not on the same side," she said. "No," I said, "but the truth is..." She looked away. The call she was on ended and she dialed again, thumb jabbing. The sun lifted another hair's breadth. The outlines of faces became features. My own features must have settled into the kind of expression that makes claims look delicate, because Colt finally dropped the performative half-smile. He ran a hand across his hair, which had held its careful shape even in the fog, and then he said, "Let's release the bus." "What?" Tessa asked, as if he had suggested they release a pet hawk. "We're not climbing a fence," he said. "We're not bringing bolt cutters to a private gate. We were told no. Even if we think we're right, this is a bad look, and I am not losing the morning to paperwork." "It's not a look," she said. "It's a contract." "It's a forged contract," I said, "and that forgery is not my problem to untangle." He ignored me. "We'll regroup," he told her. "We'll hold a quick sunrise session at the dam overlook like the driver said. You'll adjust the breakfast drop-off. We'll circle back on the paperwork." "For what it's worth," I said, "circling back on the paperwork is smart. Things are going to look different when you hold the papers up against the light." Tessa's eyes flicked to me, flicked away. She said to Colt, "We'll still need the keys for later." "Not happening," I said. He inhaled through his nose. "Fine, everyone back on the bus," he called out. "We're adjusting the plan." There were mutters, but I heard several sighs of relief. The bus started to swallow people. The SUVs made room to loop around. Bram opened the passenger door of his truck, climbed in, waited for instructions as if his hands had asked his face to make up its mind. Tessa remained at the gate for a moment longer, staring at the padlock as if she could will it to become cooperative. She looked at the decoy keys, and then at me, printing me into her mental file folder under problems. As the bus began to maneuver its way down the switchback, Colt glanced back up at me and said, "This isn't over." "No," I said, "it's barely started." He didn't like that. He got in his SUV and pulled forward to follow the bus. Tessa layered herself into the passenger seat and snapped something into her phone as the door closed. Bram gave me a little shrug through his windshield that said both "I warned them" and "I'm sorry." I waited until the last taillights disappeared into the fog like a string of cherries into cream. Then I stayed 5 more minutes, because I believe in checking whether people who say they're leaving view leaving as a metaphor. When no one returned, I walked slowly back up to the overlook, up the footpath to my deck, and poured coffee that had been waiting on the timer because sometimes your own good habits are the best backup team you'll ever have. Patch stretched and shook himself and looked at me like I was both a morning show and the weather, and then he settled at my feet. The phone buzzed, a text from my neighbor, Lita. "They tried at your gate? Heard the bus. Everything okay?" I typed back, "Yep, they left. You were right." Her bubble appeared. "Told you they'd push it. Want pancakes later?" "Maybe," I wrote, after a couple calls. I set the mug down, opened my laptop, and clicked the folder named HOA, Evidence. It contained screenshots of the email with the forged signature, a recording of Bram's visit, a PDF of the plat map with my parcel highlighted like a fluorescent island, and a thread with my attorney friend Jamal, where he had responded at 1:25 a.m. the night the forged signature arrived. "Save everything. Call me when you wake up. Don't unlock anything." I also had footage from the gate camera, The system uploads motion clips to the cloud and caches full video on a local drive for redundancy. I queued up the pre-dawn bus arrival and saved it to a folder titled Saturday Bus. I took a breath, stood, and went outside to the deck with my coffee and watched the sky tip into orange. People assume the main event of a morning like that is the confrontation. The real main event is the choice you make afterward. You can decide you won something by keeping your lock closed and go back to bed, content. Or you can decide that people who thought a typed J Hart at 1:13 a.m. would unlock your home need to learn something they'll remember the next time they consider rolling a bus at someone's driveway for a sunrise they didn't earn. I chose the second option, and not because I like fights. I like boundaries. I like them respected. And when they're not, I've learned that a clear, thorough response rooted in the actual law works better than a story told loudly at a breakfast table. I reached for the phone. The first call was to Jamal. The second was to the non-emergency line at the sheriff's office to ask a simple question. If a bus shows up again and someone tries to cut my chain, do I call 911 or direct line? The third was to the bus company, because while I couldn't fault a driver who goes where he's told, I could make sure his bosses understood exactly which address not to accept from any association, no matter how official the email looked. By the time I finished those calls, my coffee was half cold and the sun had cleared the ridge. I went inside and cooked bacon for Patch because he'd earned it by not barking at people who didn't deserve breakfast. And because when your morning starts with a laminated statute and ends with a good dog, you've got the momentum for what comes next. I spent the first hour after they left doing what Jamal always coaches me to do when adrenaline is still trying to drive the car. Narrate to a notepad as if I'm explaining it to a stranger on a jury. Time, weather, who said what was recorded, what wasn't. I took a picture of the gate panel with the decoy keyring clipped there, then took a video while I removed it and held the laminated statute card up in frame so the timestamp and sign were together. Patch watched from the steps like a supervisor who approves of your processes. Then I called Jamal. He answered on the first ring like he had been sitting on a stool next to the phone. "Tell me you didn't open that gate." "I didn't," I said. "They brought a bus, a charter bus, at 4:35 in the morning. That means someone signed a contract under your name to book your land, or said they did," he said in his I'm not surprised tone. "Recordings? Plenty. They stood outside the sign talking to my camera, told me they were here for their reservation, and asked for gate keys." "Good," he said. "You have the email with the fake signature. You have your earlier no response. You have the clip with the bus. Do not send the raw files to anyone who asks for them today, even if they're very polite. Forward them to me and to one secure drive. Keep the originals in that local folder, and don't rename the files." "I'm way ahead of you," I said. "What do we do next?" "2 tracks, he said. "First track is a demand letter and a notice of preservation. We tell the association to stop contacting you directly and to preserve all electronic data and paper records relating to anything with your name on it or your parcel number, including emails sent between midnight and dawn on Tuesday, especially that weird one 13 a.m. We give them a short window to respond. Second track is a report to the county sheriff for attempted trespass, and a separate report to the county recorder if they did any funny business like liens." I blinked at the deck boards. "Liens? Paranoid," he said. "But I don't like how sure they sounded when they said they would impose fines. People who are sure about fines sometimes mess around and record them as liens when they shouldn't. You're not in their association, but somebody in an office might not know that at a glance. What if they try again tomorrow? Then you call the sheriff," he said. "But I'll put the letter together now. I want to include a line about your right to seek an injunction if they so much as rattle the chain again. You okay if I call in a favor from a process server I trust? I want this delivered today so no one can pretend they didn't see it." "Do it," I said. "Also, their bus driver suggested a public overlook at the dam. Tessa said that was reserved too," Jamal laughed. "It isn't, but let's not give them a primer on public spaces." We hung up, and I sent him the files just like he said. Straight off the camera's export, no renaming. Then I called the non-emergency line for the sheriff's office and asked my question about chains and sirens in a voice that sounded calmer than my pulse. The deputy who answered was professional in a way that suggested they had dealt with mountain drama before sunup before. "If they try to cut a chain, that's criminal mischief," they said. "If anyone climbs or tries to force entry, call 911. If they're just parked near your gate and refusing to move, you can call non-emergency, and we can come encourage them to comply with the posted sign. If you have a recording, make sure you preserve it. I have 3 angles, I said, trying not to sound proud. Good, they said. If you think the contract they're talking about is forged, that's a separate report. You can file that at the substation later this morning. Got it, I said, and thanked them for being awake. I texted Lita to tell her about pancakes later and heard from 3 other neighbors before 8. Word travels through the hills the way fog does, quietly and everywhere at once. By the time the sun was a coin above the ridge, my inbox had a new gem. An email from events@ourassociation.org with the subject line Missed Sunrise Event Reschedule. It read like a corporate apology and a gentle complaint in one. The part that mattered: we understand access was denied despite a signed agreement on file. I replied with one sentence: direct all communication to my counsel, and put Jamal's email below it. At 8:11 a.m., I drove down to the substation. I brought a folder with hard copies, the printed plat map, the email with the 1:13 a.m. timestamp and the fake signature, my email responses, and a letter Jamal had just drafted and emailed to me that I had printed and signed at my kitchen table. The deputy who took my report had a posture like an exclamation point and a way of not filling silence that made people keep talking. I stuck to what happened and provided my files. When he asked if I had any idea who might have typed my name, my "I'm not going to speculate" felt true and also a little delicious, because I had several ideas, and evidence is sweeter when it catches up on its own. Back at home, Jamal's process server called to confirm he'd delivered 3 packets, one to the registered agent, one to the office, and one to a board member's house, because Jamal had learned they liked holding emergency meetings at private residences to dodge open meeting rules. How did he know? I read the minutes, he said. They're awful, and somebody always forgets to strip PDF metadata. He sounded like a man who truly loves footnotes. Before noon, a compliance director emailed claiming the association had ample documentation that my land sat within the umbrella of community recreational spaces, invoking a temporary day-use license from historical practice, a general maintenance fund, and consent implied by use. Translation: because we say so. Jamal replied in one clean paragraph, "My client isn't a member. He did not sign. He never consented. Your 4:35 a.m. attempt to force entry with a charter bus was improper. Preserve all records." They sent agreement executed.df, the same 1:13 a.m. file with my signature circled. Jamal called. Open properties. I read, author T. Wren, creator, Office Suite PDF trial, created 1:09 a.m. He laughed. Our coordinator with trialware, screenshot it. If they claimed it was a scan, he said, the headers would speak. I exported the .ml. 2 hours later, he reported the reply to looked official, but the originating IP was residential and the sender used a made-up subdomain. Plain English, he said. They spoofed the address and hoped the bus would do the rest. Lita arrived with pancakes like a peace treaty. They'll turn this into a process story, she warned. Don't argue in their theater. Go where opinions don't get a vote. Late afternoon, the bus company called. 2 drivers reported an association sunrise detour, the operations manager said. We're flagging that request origin. Private drive. Owner will call sheriff if trespassed. Your driver handled it well. Soon the association hired counsel and proposed a limited use agreement, acknowledging historical use in exchange for maintenance compensation. Jamal said, they want you to ratify a myth. We'll seek declaratory relief and a temporary restraining order, and added a slander of title count in case anyone tried funny business with liens. Sunday at 10:07 a.m., Ari from the board came to my gate with Tessa, Colt, and Bram. We're here to apologize and return these, he said, offering my old workshop keys from their event kit. Label said Overlook Gate. I bagged them. Those don't open the gate, I said. How you got them is its own problem. I listed terms. Stop claiming my land. No events, a specific apology, refund members, cover the bus detour and gravel wear, pay my fees, admit the fake signature, and record with the county that their covenants don't apply to my parcel. Monday, Jamal filed. By lunch, the judge signed a TRO restraining them from organizing, promoting, attempting, or representing any event on my road. Ari's first apology used confusion and relocated. Jamal redlined it to an error by the board, moved because we had no right, and we circulated a signature that did not belong to the owner. They posted the corrected version. The next morning, the county recorder called. Someone at their office had tried to record a notice of fine against my parcel. It was rejected because no covenant appears in my chain of title. The staging log said urgent fine per board directive. Jamal added slander of title and phoned their counsel with the smile you can hear. At Thursday's meeting, Jamal laid out the map, deed, emails, fake PDF, bus at dawn, apology, and rejected filing. His questions landed like pins. Who typed the name? Who bought the PDF license? Who ordered the bus? Who attempted the filing after a court order? Tessa said, me. Ari said, I don't know. Colt said, I don't micromanage. Our settlement was short and sharp. Reimburse my fees and costs, pay for gravel, post a public apology for 90 days and mail it to every owner. Record a notice of non-applicability. Complete training with outside counsel. Bar Tessa from managing for 2 years and accept liquidated damages for any future attempt to fine or record. They agreed with minor edits and asked for one tiny supervised sunrise in a couple of years. Ask then, I said, no buses ever. Consequences followed. Tessa resigned and did community service. The carrier denied coverage for willful acts and raised premiums. Colt stepped down. Ari stayed humbled. We reported the forgery. Prosecutors offered pre-charge diversion with restitution and a no-contact order, which I accepted. Life reset. The driver mailed a postcard. No charter is worth a gate. Bram brought a new chain. The ranger led Lita and me to the public overlook for a small, permitted dawn. I added a second camera, raised the laminated statute, and posted a sign. If you haven't heard Jonah say yes, you do not have permission. At the association's training, I said, liking a view is a compliment, not a contract. Colt apologized. I waved. The mountain keeps doing what it does. The lesson is simple. Don't let someone else's paperwork become your plan. If a bus asks for your keys, show the statute and keep the gate closed. Friends, thank you. See you soon.